Long before the blood and the broken watch, before the endless night staring at the ceiling and listening for noises that weren't there, I thought I was just chasing a dream. That's what ambition looks like when you're young. A beautiful, dangerous thing that convinces you pain is proof you're alive. It was October 2002 when I landed in Tijuana, Mexico. The air was thick with salt and exhaust, and everything smelled faintly like hot metal and sea wind. I was 29, hungry for something bigger than my life in Portland. My company had offered me a chance to manage a cross-border partnership. A golden opportunity, my boss had said, and I grabbed it without hesitation. I packed one suitcase, kissed my girlfriend Claire goodbye, and promised to call every night. The Motel Sandalia was a sun-faded place on the outskirts of the city, where the road turned to dust and the night smelled like tequila and gasoline. The neon sign buzzed in and out of life, and the stucco walls were cracked in a way that suggested long years and little maintenance. Still, I told myself it had charm, maybe even character. At the front desk, a young man named Raul greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His hair was slicked back, his uniform pressed too neatly. I handed him a $50 tip, joking, American hospitality, or maybe just nerves. He laughed politely, but there was something off about it, cold, mechanical. "Enjoy your stay, senor," he said, sliding the key across the counter. "Room 7, quiet side." That night I lay on the thin mattress, thinking about Claire, the promotion, the watch on my wrist. My father's watch. To the one who never gives up. He'd given it to me the year before he died of a heart attack, and I'd never gone a day without it. It felt like a promise I was still trying to keep. When I closed my eyes, I could hear the highway hum faintly beyond the walls. I didn't know it yet, but that sound, that constant, restless hum, would follow me for years. The next morning, I woke before dawn. My meeting in the city had gone better than expected. Contracts signed, handshakes exchanged. For the first time in a long while, I felt like everything was aligning. When I called the motel to request a cab, Raul answered. "Si, senor." "Of course," he said. His tone was friendly, too friendly. The sun dipped below the horizon as the cab pulled up. The driver didn't say much. Older guy, face expressionless behind dark glasses, even though night had already swallowed the light. The city gave way to quieter streets, puddles catching flashes of orange from the street lamps. I remember thinking it was strange how empty everything looked. Then came the screech. Tires burned. A car swung out of nowhere, blocking the road. The doors burst open and 4 men poured out, masked, armed, shouting. The driver didn't even flinch. "Your wallet," one of them yelled, waving a gun. I handed it over, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. My phone followed. Then one of them saw the glint on my wrist. "Take it off," he ordered. It was like hearing someone ask for a piece of my father. I hesitated, just for a second. That's when the gun cracked against my cheek. I tasted blood, hot and coppery. My ears rang. "Take it off!" I unclasped it. My hands were slick with sweat. The man snatched it, gave a mock salute, and jumped back into the car. Then they were gone, leaving nothing but exhaust and silence. I turned to the driver, expecting panic, maybe anger. But he just sat there, hands steady on the wheel, face blank. "Drive," I whispered. He obeyed. When we reached the motel, I stumbled into the lobby, blood dripping down my face. "You called that cab," I shouted at Raul. "You set me up." He stared at me with those same hollow eyes. "Senor," he said softly, "you must have been unlucky." Behind him in the hallway, a shadow shifted. Someone listening. I ran. I didn't even pack, just ran. By the time I reached San Diego, dawn was breaking. I sat on the bus, staring at my reflection. Swollen cheek, split lip, no watch. Just the imprint of where it had been. I told the border agent I'd been mugged. He nodded like he'd heard it all before. Back home, Claire tried to comfort me. "You're safe," she said, cupping my face. But something in me had changed. Safety didn't feel real anymore. I bought a replica of my father's watch a week later. Same model, same engraving. But when I looked at it, it felt like lying. I could still see the other one, the real one, ticking away somewhere in the dark, on the wrist of a man who didn't earn it. I called the Tijuana police. They took a report but never followed up. Months passed. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been marked. At night, I dreamed of that cab, of Raul's too polite smile, of my father's voice saying, "Don't give up, son." I started drinking more. Claire noticed. "You're still there, aren't you?" she asked one night. "In that place." I didn't answer. She was right. Then one morning I read in an online forum that the Motel Sandalia had closed. Health violations, the post said, but a few replies mentioned something else. Disappearances. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I did. 2 years later, I went back. It wasn't courage, it was obsession. I told Claire I had another business trip, but the truth was I couldn't live another day not knowing. I rented a car in San Diego and drove across the border. The road to Sandalia was overgrown now, the sign half buried in dust. The motel stood abandoned, windows shattered, the paint peeled to bone. I pushed the door open. It groaned like something alive. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and memories. Room 7 was still there. My suitcase, my papers, gone, of course. But on the nightstand lay something small, gleaming faintly under a crack of sunlight. My watch. I picked it up. The hands were frozen at 11:46. I turned it over. The engraving was scratched, but legible. To the one who never gives up. My stomach twisted. Someone had placed it there, waiting. I didn't stay long. I walked out, heart hammering, half expecting to see Raul behind the counter again. But the lobby was empty. Only dust and silence. When I reached the car, a young man in a security uniform appeared from behind the building. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "This place, bad things happened." I nodded. "I know." He tilted his head. "You one of them?" "No," I said quietly. "Just someone who got lucky." It's been 20 years now. I'm 49. The replica watch sits in my dresser drawer, and the original, the one from that motel, I keep locked away. Not because it's valuable, but because it reminds me of everything I almost lost. Claire left eventually. Can't blame her. I was living in two worlds, the one I walked through and the one that replayed in my mind. I started writing after that. Stories about roads that go nowhere, hotels that smell like regret, people who learn the hard way that safety is an illusion. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the hum of the highway. I tell myself it's just the wind, but deep down I know it's something else. A reminder that every choice has a cost. When I close my eyes, I see that boulder of a man in the mirror of my memory. Me, 20 years younger, full of hope, wearing my father's watch like it could protect me from the world. If I could speak to him now, I'd tell him one thing. You can't outrun what you don't understand. Life has a way of teaching us that not everything we lose can be replaced, and not every second chance is a blessing. Trust is precious, but blind trust can destroy you. The past doesn't disappear when you escape it. It lingers, waiting for you to face it. Sometimes survival isn't about being brave. It's about learning when to walk away and never look back. The rain had been relentless for 3 days. Interstate 70 stretched out like a black ribbon under the stormy sky, headlights smearing across the asphalt. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, my knuckles pale in the dim glow of the dashboard. Chicago had been suffocating. The apartment I once shared with Elise felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Divorce papers sat on the kitchen counter, unsigned yet staring at me every morning like a condemnation. My daughter, Emma, lived with her mother, and even phone calls were strained. I felt like a stranger reaching across glass. I didn't really know why I was leaving Chicago. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the need to outrun the collapse of my life. My car carried me into Indiana, and the rain kept hammering like some relentless percussionist. When the Redwood Pines Motor Inn finally appeared on the horizon, I barely registered its faded red doors and flickering neon sign. The motel looked tired, abandoned in spirit even if it still technically existed. Inside, the clerk was a gaunt man with a nicotine-stained mustache. He handed me a key to room 12, muttering without looking up. "Try not to mind the folks next door. They've been here a while." I nodded automatically, too weary to ask questions. The room smelled of damp carpet and bleach. The air conditioner rattled and hissed in protest. I kicked off my shoes, loosened my tie, and dialed Emma's number. No answer. "Love you, Bug," I whispered into the receiver, my voice tight. The line was dead. I hung up and sank into the bed, hoping to lose myself in sleep. The storm outside made everything feel smaller, like the walls were pressing in. Then, a bang. Loud, deliberate, behind the wall of room 11. Voices rose. A man, rough and harsh. "I told you not to talk to him again, Vanessa." The woman's plea was muffled. "Bobby, please." Then glass shattered, and a heavy thud shook my wall. I froze. Part of me wanted to stay out of it, to pretend it wasn't happening. Another part, the part that had always hated helplessness, wanted to check. I cracked the door just slightly. Rain lashed against the corridor. The door to room 11 was ajar. A man's silhouette, shoulders broad, neck tattooed, held something metallic. My heart stopped. Bobby. He turned, and I ducked back instinctively. I tried calling the front desk. No answer. 911 dropped calls. Storm had knocked out half the cell towers. I stayed low, pretending I wasn't there, until slow, deliberate knocks came at my door. "You watchin', pal?" a voice taunted, then whispering from the vent above. "She says you're a salesman. Long drive. Alone." Both man and woman laughed. My pulse hammered in my ears. I zipped my suitcase, weighing escape against discovery, and decided, enough. Headlights flashed through the window. 2 men, Bobby and someone else, a crowbar glinting. I crouched behind the bed as they approached. Thunder gave me cover. With a surge of panic, I forced open the bathroom window. Mud caked my shoes, water soaked my coat. I ran to my car, engine sputtering before roaring to life. Behind me, the neon sign flickered. Red Win. By the time I reached the truck stop 20 miles away, I was shaking. Police confirmed my suspicion. Redwood Pines had been condemned months ago. A man named Robert Hale and Vanessa Cole had died in room 11 the previous May. I never drove that route again. But even in Chicago, when rain hits the windows like drum beats, I hear the muffled thud through the wall, like Bobby never really left. Before that night, my life had been nothing remarkable, at least on the surface. I worked for a medical supply company, driving hundreds of miles a week selling equipment to hospitals and clinics. The travel kept me distracted, a necessary escape from my failed marriage and the quiet despair that settled into my apartment. Chicago had been beautiful once, the skyline, Lake Michigan in the winter fog, neighborhood diners with endless coffee refills. But now, each street felt like a reminder of loss. I'd met Elise in college. She was sharp, quick-witted, and fiercely independent. Our daughter, Emma, was everything we had dreamed of, until arguments about money, career, and our future shattered the fragile foundation we'd built. The divorce was brutal in its quiet way. No screaming, no lawyers dragging us through court for months. Just emptiness, absent calls, and the relentless tick of clocks in a quiet apartment. So I drove, sometimes to Cleveland, sometimes Indianapolis, anywhere that put the road between me and what I'd left behind. When I found the Redwood Pines Motor Inn, it promised anonymity, a pause from the world. I didn't expect it to feel alive, to breathe, to push back against me in ways I couldn't rationalize. I kept replaying the night in my head, the storm, the knocking, the vent. the whispering voices. I convinced myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, paranoia brought on by exhaustion. Still, my hands shook when I drove through rural Indiana afterward. Shadows seemed to move in the periphery. Every small sound, a crow's call, a creaking branch, was amplified. I couldn't tell anyone about what happened. Friends would laugh. Cops would dismiss me. The motel didn't exist anymore. Room 11's fire had erased all evidence. And yet, when I slept in hotels afterward, I instinctively checked the walls, the vents, the rooms next door, convinced someone, or something, was still there, waiting. Sleep became difficult. I avoided motels. I stopped answering the phone. Every time rain hit the windshield, I felt the weight of that night pressing down, a reminder that escape is never clean. I started taking longer routes, avoiding interstates. Yet somehow the road always led me back to small towns, forgotten highways, and empty buildings with histories I wasn't meant to know. Once, in rural Kentucky, I pulled over at a diner. Old neon lights buzzed. I ordered black coffee and stared out at the asphalt. A man at the counter mentioned the fire at Redwood Pines. His tone was casual, as if talking about a local sports team. But the details, the names, the rooms, made my stomach twist. Robert Hale and Vanessa Cole, he said. Terrible accident. Poor kids. I wanted to tell him I'd been there, seen it, felt it. But I swallowed the words. No one would believe me. Even now I find myself checking motels from the street. Half glimpses of flickering signs, doors slightly ajar, cracked windows. I drive past quickly, but the hair on the back of my neck rises anyway. Something about being seen, being noticed by the world, changes the rules. It makes the hidden things visible. The more I tried to rationalize, the less sense it made. Rain hitting the windows, flickering lights, whispers through vents. All of it should have been explainable. But there was a logic to it, a cruel, deliberate logic. Room 11 had a story, a weight, a history that didn't allow me to forget. Months later, I drove through Evansville again. Curiosity, or maybe compulsion, pulled me near the old motel. I stopped at the overgrown lot. Rain had stopped. Nature had begun to reclaim the building. Faded letters barely spelled out. Red Win. I walked the perimeter, peering at boarded windows. Nothing stirred, nothing moved. And yet, I could almost hear the thud of bodies against walls, whispers behind vents, the laughter of people who didn't exist anymore. It became clear, some things don't end when fire, demolition, or time claims them. They linger in perception, in memory, and fear. Room 11 had left a mark on me that wouldn't wash away with sunlight or distance. I eventually returned to Chicago, forced to confront my own life. I learned to live with fear, to accept it as part of me, like an unwanted passenger in the passenger seat of my own life. I realized that trying to outrun the past, the fire, the storm, the night I barely escaped, was futile. The lesson wasn't about ghosts or haunted motels. It was about awareness. Some places, some decisions, some people leave impressions you carry forever. Rain still terrifies me. Every darkened room, every vent, every storm brings me back to that night. I've learned to live with it because fear is not the absence of life. It's a reminder that life is fragile, unpredictable, and fleeting. And maybe that's the lesson. Pay attention to what surrounds you. Don't ignore danger, don't ignore instinct, and above all, respect the past, because some things, once touched, never leave you. Life is fragile, and the choices we make, where we go, who we trust, what we notice, leave marks that can't always be undone. Fear is a signal, not a punishment. Facing it with awareness and respect for both the past and the present is the only way to keep moving forward. I still remember that summer heat, the kind that makes the air feel thick enough to chew. It was July 1996, and I was 12, old enough to notice the world, but still young enough to believe my mom could fix anything. We were driving from Tucson to Los Angeles, chasing what she called a fresh start. I didn't understand what that really meant at the time. All I knew was that my parents had stopped talking except to argue, and suddenly Mom had packed up our lives into a faded green Toyota Camry with peeling bumper stickers and a trunk full of everything we owned. My brother Caleb was 8, restless and sticky from the heat. He kept kicking the back of Mom's seat, asking if we were almost there. Almost where? I remember asking him. Wherever Mom thinks happiness lives, he said. He had a way of saying things that stuck with me long after. The roads stretched forever, long ribbons of black asphalt shimmering under the Arizona sun. Every so often, Mom would hum to herself or reach over to adjust the radio, trying to find a station that wasn't static. I watched her from the back seat, one hand on the wheel, the other brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She looked tired but determined. By the time we rolled into Yuma, the sky was turning a dusty orange. The Camry's engine sounded like it was sighing with relief. We spotted the Blue Lantern Motel, a low one-story building with a flickering neon sign that read Vacancy. The paint was chipped, the pool gate hung crooked, and there was a Coke machine humming outside the office. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and something metallic. Mom signed the registry while Caleb leaned against my arm, half asleep. That's when I noticed him. A tall man sitting in the corner of the lobby. He looked like he'd been carved out of the desert. Sunburned skin, dusty boots, and eyes too sharp to ignore. He didn't speak, didn't smile. Just stared. At me, at Mom, like we were part of some private equation he was solving in his head. "Mom," I whispered. "That guy's watching us." She glanced over her shoulder, then back at the clerk. "Ignore him, honey. Probably just tired like us." But even as she took the room key and guided us out, I could feel his eyes following. Room 17 smelled like bleach and cigarette smoke. The air conditioner rattled in the window like it was fighting for its life, and the carpet left little black specks on our socks. Caleb flopped on one of the beds and turned on the TV. Static. Then an old rerun of Full House. Mom sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing her temples. 10 hours on the road, she muttered. "We'll swim, eat something, and crash early." The pool outside glowed turquoise in the fading light. Plastic tiki lamps buzzed around it, their bulbs fighting off the dusk. Caleb was already tugging at Mom's hand. "Come on, you promised." I followed reluctantly. My swimsuit stuck to my skin and the deck was still hot enough to burn bare feet. That's when I saw him again. The man from the lobby, sitting near the fence in the same dusty clothes, boots planted firmly on the ground, watching us. Mom noticed too. 10 minutes, she said under her breath. We splashed half-heartedly, pretending not to see him. I could feel his gaze like a physical weight pressing down on us. Finally, Mom called it. "That's enough." As we walked back to the room, I glanced over my shoulder. He was still there. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Inside, Mom double-locked the door. "Don't worry," she said, forcing a smile. "People are weird sometimes. Doesn't mean they're dangerous." But her eyes said something else. Sometime after 11, I woke to the sound of water running. Mom was showering. The bathroom fan buzzed faintly, a white noise against the hum of the air conditioner. Caleb was asleep beside me, one arm dangling off the bed. I started doodling in my notebook by the light of a lamp, just shapes and words the way kids do when they can't sleep. That's when it happened. A knock, 3 slow, deliberate taps. Then a man's voice. "Housekeeping." I froze. "We already got towels," I called back, my voice small. "Just checking," the voice said, quieter now. "You had a nice swim?" My blood turned to ice. The way he said it, not curious, not kind, like he was reminding me he'd been there. The door handle turned. Once, twice, then stopped. "Mom!" I screamed. She came flying out of the bathroom, dripping wet, wrapped in a towel. She slammed the deadbolt shut and pressed her shoulder to the door. "Who's there?" Silence. Then slow footsteps retreating down the walkway. We waited, listening to every sound. Mom's chest rose and fell like she couldn't get enough air. Finally, she said, "Pack up. Now." We didn't talk while we packed. Caleb rubbed his eyes, confused and scared, asking what was happening. "We're leaving," Mom said. That was all. When she called the front desk, the clerk sounded half asleep. "We don't have housekeeping at night," he said flatly. "But someone was at our door," Mom shouted. "Ma'am, maybe you imagined—" She hung up before he finished. By midnight, we were in the car, engine idling. The motel lights flickered in the rearview mirror. As we pulled away, I saw him, standing beneath the sign. That same man, his outline glowing in the neon. Just standing. Watching. The desert highway stretched ahead, black and endless. Caleb fell back asleep, his head on my shoulder. Mom kept her eyes on the road, jaw tight. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but I already knew the answer. When we hit the California border an hour later, she finally spoke. "Some people," she said quietly, "they look at others like prey. You can't ever ignore that feeling when it hits you. Ever." I didn't sleep that night. I kept watching the rearview mirror until dawn. I'm 39 now. I live in Seattle, married, 2 kids of my own. But every time we take a road trip, I still check every motel lock twice, sometimes 3 times. Mom passed away in 2017. At her funeral, Caleb told me he'd driven through Yuma a few years earlier. "The Blue Lantern's gone," he said, "torn down. Cops said there were disappearances there, probably more than anyone knew." That night I dreamed of room 17, of the flickering pool lights, the hum of the AC, and that voice saying, "You had a nice swim." I woke up sweating, heart pounding, the same way I had 27 years ago. There's a certain innocence that never comes back once you've been afraid like that. Fear leaves a fingerprint. It doesn't fade, it just settles deeper. Whenever I pass an old neon sign on the side of some empty highway, I feel it again. That prickling awareness that someone, somewhere, might still be watching. Life teaches us that intuition is rarely wrong. The world can be unpredictable, but instinct is the quiet guardian that whispers when something isn't right. Never ignore that voice, the one that tells you to lock the door, to leave sooner, to trust your gut. Fear, when it comes from truth, isn't weakness. It's wisdom in disguise. I remember that April evening in New Haven like it was etched into my bones. My partner, Riley Vargas, and I were winding down the night shift when dispatch buzzed through the radio. "Unit 14, respond to the Maplewood Inn. Possible assault, room 14, female screaming." I felt the hair on my neck prickle, not because we hadn't seen domestic calls before, we had plenty, but because something in the dispatcher's tone sounded off, panicked, desperate, almost incoherent. The Maplewood Inn wasn't a place you'd notice unless you were looking for it. Low-rise, unassuming, tucked behind a shopping plaza, with a flickering sign that read, "Vacancy." As we pulled into the lot, I noticed the parking lot was almost empty, the fluorescent lights casting long, sickly shadows across the damp asphalt. Riley and I approached room 14 cautiously. The door was ajar, a faint light spilling out into the hallway. I drew my weapon instinctively, though I tried to keep my movements calm. "Police. Ma'am, are you okay?" I called softly. Inside, a woman sat trembling on the edge of the bed. Her nightgown was disheveled, hair tangled, eyes wide with terror. He shot me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But he's still here. He's going to—" I scanned the room. Nothing. No blood, no gun, no signs of struggle. Just the scattered remains of a modest life. Prescription bottles on the nightstand labeled for someone named Diane Garrett. "Ma'am, who did this to you?" I asked gently, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. Her eyes darted constantly to corners of the room. She flinched at every sound, every creak. Riley crouched beside me, trying to offer reassurance. The inconsistencies started small. She couldn't recall her own phone number, her address, or details about her family. She hesitated when asked to show ID. Then, when we checked motel records, my stomach sank. Diane Garrett had been dead for 6 years. The woman froze. Her eyes widened. She whispered, barely audible, My name isn't Diane. It's Carla Hendrick." Riley and I exchanged glances. My gut told me we were dealing with more than just a scared woman. Carla's story spilled out in fragmented, terrified bursts. She had been abducted as a teenager by Diane Garrett's husband, Ronald. For 6 years, she had been forced to live as Diane. Every document, every photograph, every piece of clothing carefully manipulated to maintain the illusion. He taught me everything," she whispered, trembling. "How to answer questions, how to cry, how to lie. Every day, I was rehearsing memories that weren't mine." I felt a sick weight settle in my chest. The psychological abuse she described was meticulous, systematic, calculated. She hadn't just been isolated, she had been trained to exist as someone else. The motel room wasn't just a temporary hiding place. It had become her world, the walls her captor had built around her mind as much as her body. We found evidence almost immediately: a hidden wardrobe in the corner, locks on the closet doors, subtle damage in the wood paneling indicating forced confinement. Pages of a yellowed diary documented Ronald's manipulations, step by step, a chilling window into the life of a calculated predator. Carla's hands shook as she traced the words on the diary, recalling every lesson, every fear. He told me if I ever told anyone, he'd find me. He'd make me disappear. And I believed him. Every single day. It was hard to imagine such control over someone so young. Her terror wasn't just fear of the present. It was the imprint of 6 years of domination, a constant mental conditioning that had made her doubt her own identity. Riley and I dug deeper. Motel records, local archives, interviews with neighbors. We learned that Ronald Garrett had committed suicide weeks earlier, in the motel basement. The room where Carla had been held had been left largely undisturbed. Even with the immediate threat gone, Carla's trauma was evident in every twitch, every startle. A creak in the HVAC, a shadow passing the hallway. Each sound and movement sent her heart racing. We contacted her family in Pennsylvania. Tears streamed down their faces when we explained what had happened. The reunion was bittersweet. Joy mixed with anger, guilt, and disbelief that she had survived years of manipulation without the world noticing. Carla confided to me quietly later that week. Even now, months later, she sometimes felt the weight of Ronald Garrett's presence. It was as if the motel had absorbed him, the walls carrying his control, refusing to release her fully from the fear. Carla agreed to accompany me and Riley back to the motel, cautiously. She needed to reclaim her sense of reality, to see the space where she had been trapped. The motel lobby smelled the same: stale coffee, damp carpet, faint cleaning chemicals. As we stepped into room 14, Carla stiffened. It looks the same," she whispered. Every detail matched her memories. The wardrobe, the nightstand, even the worn carpet. She walked slowly to the window, peering out at the empty lot. I don't feel scared right now," she said. "But it's still heavy. Like he left a shadow that never fully lifted." We spent hours documenting the room, cataloging evidence, and slowly walking her through memories to separate reality from the learned responses Ronald had instilled. Step by step, she began reclaiming herself, identifying what was hers, what had been forced upon her. By the end of the visit, Carla exhaled deeply. "It's over," she said. I wasn't sure if she truly believed it yet, but I hoped, desperately, that she could begin to heal. Carla returned home to Pennsylvania, beginning therapy and reconnecting with the family she had been forced to forget. The motel remained behind her, a dark chapter, but no longer a cage. I sometimes think of her when I drive past small motels or quiet streets. The memory lingers, not just of Ronald Garrett, but of the resilience of the human spirit. Carla had survived years of psychological imprisonment, navigating trauma I can barely comprehend. She once told me, "I feel the shadow sometimes, but I'm learning that it's not me. I can step out of it." That's what mattered. Survival is not just escaping physical captivity. It's reclaiming your mind, your identity, your life. Even weeks later, in my quiet apartment in New Haven, I can hear the faint creak of my floorboards or the hum of my heater. And I think of Carla. Her strength is a reminder that while evil can leave marks, resilience and vigilance can restore what's been stolen. Evil often hides in plain sight, quiet and unassuming, leaving scars that aren't always visible. True courage is not simply escaping danger, but reclaiming your mind, your identity, and your autonomy after it has been taken. Awareness, vigilance, and empathy for those whose voices have been silenced are crucial. Survival is not just living, it's reclaiming yourself. I've spent most of my adult life chasing the perfect shot, the kind of photo that makes people stop flipping through a magazine and stare for a second longer than usual. It's not a glamorous life, no matter how the job description sounds. Most days it's just mud, bad coffee, and disappointment. That winter of 2011, I was 34, tired, and broke enough to be questioning if I was still chasing art or just running from stability. I'd been on assignment for a wildlife series in northern Ontario, timber wolves in the snow. My partner bailed last minute when the forecast turned ugly, but I went anyway. I told myself, courage separates the greats from the forgotten. Turns out, it mostly separates the reckless from the lucky. By the time I realized the blizzard was rolling in faster than expected, I was 40 miles from the nearest town. My crew had already called it off. My truck skidded more than once on the icy highway, and the wind was howling hard enough to erase the road shoulder. I didn't even notice the sign until it flickered through the snow. Pine Hollow Motel. I don't know what made me turn in. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was just exhaustion. The parking lot was half buried in snow, the neon sign buzzing like it was trying to stay alive. Inside, a small bell jingled weakly as I pushed through the door. The lobby was dim and smelled of cold air and mothballs. A woman appeared behind the counter, frail, probably late 70s, her shoulders wrapped in a shawl. "Rough night to be on the road," she said. "You're lucky we're open." Her name tag said, Mrs. Clausen. Her voice had that paper-thin crackle of someone who's been breathing winter air too long. "Room 9, she said, sliding me a brass key. "Don't mind the wind. It gets loud up here." Her eyes never quite met mine. I paid in cash, thanked her, and carried my gear to the room. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and kerosene. Only one light worked. I told myself this was fine. Just another lonely stop between assignments. Just another night. I didn't know yet how long that night would follow me. Room 9 looked like it hadn't been touched since the 70s. Wood paneling, floral curtains, a TV that probably only spoke static. The heater wheezed when I turned it on, coughing up a cloud of dust before settling into a low groan. I hung my parka, plugged in my laptop, and made some instant coffee that tasted like cardboard. I tried editing photos, but my focus was gone. The silence outside wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that pressed against your eardrums. I stepped to the window. Snow was coming down hard, glowing orange under the lone parking lot light. Beyond that, just woods. Endless white woods. I must have fallen asleep sometime after midnight. When I woke, it was to a sound, a dull, distant thump. At first, I thought it was ice sliding off the roof, but then came another, closer this time. I got up, rubbed my eyes, and went to the window. The glass was fogged, but through the condensation I saw them. Footprints. A single line leading from the tree line toward my window, and then stopping. No other tracks, no returns, just one set, ending right there. I told myself maybe it was old. Maybe the snow had covered the rest. Still, my chest tightened. I checked my phone. No signal. Figures. I put my coat on and stepped outside, just for peace of mind. The cold bit like knives. The prints were fresh, edges sharp, snow not yet crusted over. They led straight from the woods to my window. Nowhere else. I followed them halfway before stopping. Something about the way they ended, not even turned, not even hesitant, felt wrong. I went back inside, heart pounding, and shoved a chair under the doorknob. Then I laughed at myself, a nervous bark. "It's fine," I muttered. "It's just snow." But the heater moaned again. The window rattled and the room didn't feel fine anymore. At 2:30, sleep was impossible. I kept hearing small sounds. Maybe the wind, maybe not. I decided to go find Mrs. Clausen, ask if anyone else was staying here. The lobby was empty. The front desk light flickered, and behind it the office door was cracked open. I could hear a faint voice, radio static, murmuring in French. I called out, "Mrs. Clausen?" Nothing. I knocked on the frame. The radio hissed, then went silent. The air felt wrong, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. I looked around. There were no car keys on the hook rack behind the desk, no guest names in the register except mine. My skin prickled. When I went back to my room, I stopped halfway down the hall. The footprints outside my window, I could see them from here, were different, closer, as if someone had come back. I locked the door again, this time sliding the dresser in front of it. Every sound now felt targeted. The wind, the heater, even the ticking clock. Around 3 a.m. there was a new sound, a faint, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the glass. I froze. 3 taps, then silence. Then from outside the window a man's voice, calm, measured. "You left your light on." It wasn't a question. Adrenaline drowned out thought. I grabbed my camera tripod, clutching it like a weapon. "Who's there?" I shouted. Silence. Then a faint crunch of snow receding toward the woods. I checked my phone again. No bars. I shoved my feet into my boots, grabbed my truck keys, and yanked the door open. The night was blindingly white. The footprints now led away from my door, back toward the trees. I followed them with my eyes until they vanished into the darkness. Every window in the motel's front row was open, curtains fluttering out into the storm, all except mine. I sprinted to my truck, engine coughing before roaring to life. I didn't even look back. The highway was half buried, visibility terrible, but I kept driving. For the first time in years, I was scared enough to pray. When the sky began to lighten, I was just outside Winnipeg. I pulled over at a diner, shaking so hard I could barely hold the coffee cup. I told myself I'd call the motel later. Explain, apologize, maybe send money for the room. But part of me didn't want to hear that voice again. I waited until noon to make the call. The number rang twice before a man answered. His tone was flat, irritated. "Pine Hollow Motel," he said. I hesitated. "Hi, I stayed there last night, room 9. I think I left some equipment behind." A pause. Then, "You must have the wrong number. Pine Hollow's been closed for years, since 2007. I laughed, a dry, uncertain sound. "No, that's impossible. I spoke to an older woman, Mrs. Clausen." "There's no one by that name," he interrupted. "That property's condemned." I hung up. My stomach dropped. That night I woke suddenly, the faint smell of pine in the air. My camera bag sat at the foot of my bed, the same one I'd left at the motel. Snow was melting in a small puddle beneath it. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. But when I finally did, the lens cap was smeared with something, thin streaks of mud. And across the inside pocket, clear as day, were small and footprints, pressed in from the inside out. I still tell myself there's a logical explanation. Maybe I grabbed it half asleep. Maybe someone mailed it back. But the bag never left my sight since that morning. And every January night when the wind starts to howl against my apartment windows, I hear it. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Sometimes the past leaves footprints you can't explain, not because it's supernatural, but because fear has a way of carving its own truth. Trust your instincts, respect your limits, and know when to walk away. Survival isn't about bravery. It's about listening when something deep inside whispers, "Leave while you still can." I never thought much about small towns until I found myself driving through one in late November, the road stretching endlessly under a gray Montana sky. The air was sharp with cold, biting through my jacket as I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I was Clara Bennett, 23, a graduate student on the cusp of finishing my senior thesis, and utterly convinced I could handle isolation. My mom, naturally, didn't agree. She'd called me twice before I left Billings, insisting I check in with someone while working alone. I laughed, telling her, "Mom, it's just a motel. I've stayed alone before. Remember the cabins?" She sighed, but I ignored her worry. I had work to do. Cedar Hollow Motel appeared off the side of the road like a relic from another era. Its neon vacancy sign flickered weakly, half-burned letters buzzing in the wind. It was small, aged, and the kind of place writers and loners gravitate toward. I parked beside room 7, grabbed my duffel and pushed open the creaky glass door. Henry, the front desk clerk, stood behind the counter, his thin frame hunched under the dim fluorescent lights. Cigarette smoke clung faintly to his clothes and his smile felt rehearsed. "Evening," he said, handing me a brass key. "Room 7, top floor." "Thanks," I said, forcing calm. Something about the way he lingered on me felt wrong. Maybe it was just the long drive, I told myself. Room 7 smelled faintly of mothballs and old carpet, the heater rattling unevenly. I set up my laptop on the desk and opened my thesis folder, but the quiet pressed in around me, making every small noise sharper. Around 11:30 p.m., footsteps crunched softly outside. I froze, staring at the window. A man stood at the edge of the parking lot, his long coat blending with the darkened pine trees. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just watched. My first instinct was to call Henry, but the phone line was dead. My cell signal was weak, barely 1 bar. Panic crept in. I backed away, telling myself it was just someone passing through. But the footsteps returned, slower, deliberate, heading toward the lone tree by the motel. The glow of a cigarette revealed part of his face. Pale, expressionless. I grabbed a baseball bat from the trunk and sat by the door. Hours passed. The wind rattled the siding, the heater clanked unevenly, and the man never left. When dawn finally crept across the sky, the footsteps receded. I exhaled, trembling, and packed my things. Henry was gone, and muddy footprints led from the side entrance toward the woods. The lobby phone rang suddenly. I answered. Silence. Then a faint, hollow chuckle. I hung up and left without looking back. Weeks later, I learned Cedar Hollow Motel had a long history of trespassers and disappearances. Nobody ever got caught. I tell myself I was lucky, that the man was just a drifter or voyeur. But sometimes, even in my apartment in Billings, I feel that same gaze, as if someone is standing just beyond my window, waiting. I returned to Cedar Hollow only in my nightmares. The memory of the man's stare haunted me, and I began replaying every detail. The crunch of gravel, the cigarette glow, the faint mocking chuckle. I couldn't explain why I kept thinking of it, but the more I ignored it, the sharper the memory became. A few weeks later, I had to return for another research trip. I couldn't get the motel out of my head, even though rationally I knew it was probably safe in daylight. As soon as I checked in, unease returned. Henry was there, but his smile seemed tighter, more controlled. He handed me the key silently, his eyes lingering a beat too long. That night, I unpacked my laptop and tried to focus on work. By 10 p.m., the wind picked up, rattling the window frames. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside room 7, slow, Deliberate, dragging. My pulse raced. I peeked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty, the light flickering weakly above me. I forced myself to return to work, but the heater's uneven clank and the creaking floorboards made me jump at every sound. Then I heard it again, the footsteps closer, moving toward my door. My hands shook as I reached for the baseball bat. A knock. 3 soft, deliberate knocks. "Hello?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. The knocking continued, slow and measured. I backed away from the door, heart hammering. I didn't sleep that night. Too tense, too alert, every sense screaming that something, was watching me. By morning there was nothing, just a small smear of mud at the bottom of my door. Henry was gone from the desk again. I left quickly, refusing to stay another night. The feeling of being hunted clung to me. Even in crowded streets of Billings, I imagined footsteps following, watching, waiting. Months later, I tried to put Cedar Hollow behind me. I moved into a larger apartment with better security and vowed not to travel alone to remote locations. But the past has a way of catching up. I received an email from an unknown sender one evening. "You saw me. I saw you. Don't forget." My blood ran cold. The message came from a burner account. No name, no location, nothing. I told myself it was a prank. Still, the memory of that man's hollow stare made the hairs on my neck stand on end. A week later, while working late in the library, I felt it again, the sense of being watched. My pulse accelerated. Every shadow in the corner of my eye seemed to move, stretch, twist. When I glanced out the window, I thought I saw a faint silhouette in the distance. I blinked. Gone. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I began double-checking locks, leaving lights on, and avoiding solitude at night. Even in the crowded streets of Billings, I felt eyes on me, the sensation of something deliberate, patient, waiting. Determined to reclaim control, I returned to Cedar Hollow 6 months later. I needed closure. The neon sign flickered as I approached, the motel exactly as I remembered. Quiet, oppressive, silent. Henry was behind the desk, his expression unreadable. I asked about room 7. Henry shrugged. "No one stayed there recently," he said. "Most people avoid it." I insisted on seeing it. The door creaked as I stepped inside. The room smelled the same, old carpet, mothballs, faint smoke. I walked to the window, peering into the dark lot. Nothing. The silence pressed in. Then a shadow moved across the edge of the tree line. My heart skipped. A voice whispered almost inside my head, "You can't run." I spun around. Empty room. My breath came fast, my hands shaking. Somehow, seeing the place again, knowing I wasn't alone in my memory, I realized that my fear had grown larger than any actual threat. But still, the instinct to flee was overwhelming. I left, driving away faster than I ever had before. I never returned. Cedar Hollow existed now as a scar in my memory, a lesson etched in tension and dread. Back in Billings, I forced myself to rebuild normalcy. I finished my thesis, got a steady job, and tried to let the memory fade. But the feeling of being watched never fully left. Sometimes, when working late in my apartment, I swore I felt a presence, the faint chill of eyes on my back. I realized that fear wasn't just about a stranger outside a window. It was about ignoring instincts, underestimating danger, and thinking we can control every situation. Cedar Hollow Motel taught me that caution is necessary, that the mind can be both protector and betrayer. Even now, I check locks twice. I avoid isolated places when possible. And sometimes, when the wind rattles the windows and the shadows stretch long across the room, I hear the faint echo of footsteps, a reminder that the world can be quietly, patiently, dangerous. Fear is not weakness, it is a signal. Ignoring instincts, underestimating risks, or isolating ourselves in pursuit of convenience can lead to peril. Vigilance, awareness, and respect for the unknown are not paranoia. They are tools for survival. The world is not always cruel, but it is rarely as empty as it seems. I never thought a routine Friday night could change the way I looked at the world forever. My name is Dylan Reed, and I was 20, a college student in Eugene, Oregon, scraping by with a part-time job delivering pizzas. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me independent and paid my rent. That night, October 2019, the rain had been coming down steady for hours. Mist hung over the streets, and the neon of empty shops flickered like broken signals through the fog. I had just picked up an order from a downtown pizza place and was staring at the GPS when my boss's voice came over the headset. "Dylan, this one's a tip-heavy delivery. Take it to Willow Creek Motel, edge of town. 3rd floor." The guy said it's a party. I groaned. Willow Creek Motel was one of those places I'd driven past dozens of times, the kind of building that looked perfectly normal from the street, but always seemed off when you were close. I'd delivered there before, but never up to the 3rd floor. The wet pavement reflected the motel's flickering neon, and the air smelled of damp carpet and decay before I even got out of the car. The lobby was empty when I arrived. A small stack of brochures sat under a dusty bell, and the security camera above the desk tilted slowly, but there was no attendant. I knocked on the door, and a tall, thin man appeared, his smile wide, too wide, like he had just heard the world's best joke. His eyes darted oddly, never resting on mine for more than a second. "3rd floor," he said, handing me a small tip envelope. "Party's upstairs. Make sure they get the pizzas." Something about his tone made my stomach knot. There was a patience in it, deliberate and unnerving, like he expected me to obey without question. I took the envelope and stepped into the stairwell. The stairs smelled musty, the carpet damp, the walls scuffed and peeling. Every step I took echoed into the darkness, and the light above flickered sporadically, casting long, twitching shadows. I told myself it was just a dirty old building, nothing more, but the unease settled heavy in my chest. By the 2nd floor, I noticed a door slightly ajar. Inside, chairs were stacked haphazardly against the wall. The smell of smoke lingered, but no one was there. My pulse sped up, and I muttered under my breath, "Just maintenance. Probably maintenance." But I knew deep down that wasn't it. The corridor on the 3rd floor seemed longer than it should have been. The fluorescent lights flickered unevenly, creating pools of shadow that crawled toward me with every step. My hands gripped the pizza boxes tighter, my knuckles whitening. The faint metallic tang in the air made my stomach twist. I reached the room number the man had given me, a peeling wooden door with a warped frame. I knocked once, then again. No response. I tried the knob. It turned. I pushed the door open slowly, expecting a celebration of college students, laughter, music, maybe someone waving at me. Nothing. Darkness. Empty air, thick and still. The only sound was the soft drip of water somewhere in the ceiling. My heart pounded so loud I was sure whoever, or whatever, was watching would hear it. Then behind me, I heard the click of the stairwell door. "Help me carry them inside," said a calm voice, almost whispering, with a strange edge of command. I froze. The tall man from the lobby appeared, his smile gone, replaced with a cold, piercing glare. His eyes were sharp, hawk-like, studying me as if I were an insect trapped under glass. My gut turned. Something was very wrong. I dropped one box, then another. The pizzas hit the damp carpet with a wet splat. The smell of cheese and sauce mingled with the mildew and smoke. Adrenaline surged. I bolted down the hallway, using the walls for balance as I scrambled toward the stairs. Every shadow seemed to reach for me. I stumbled down the narrow stairwell, slipping on wet patches and twisting my ankle. My shoes squeaked against the carpet, echoing through the empty building like gunshots. I could hear the man's footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, patient. Every step I took he mirrored, never rushing, never stopping, just following. My breath came in harsh bursts, my chest burning. I considered hiding in one of the rooms, but they were all dark, empty and silent, and hiding felt like inviting him to find me. I had to get out, had to reach the lobby. Finally, I burst into the lobby. Empty. No envelope. No man. The security camera above tilted slowly as if to mock me. I grabbed the exit door, tugged at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Panic surged. I banged my fists against the glass and pulled harder. The door gave way, and rain hit me like a wall of ice. I didn't care. I sprinted to my car, slipping, almost falling, scraping my palms and knees on the gravel and mud. The engine started after a few turns of the key. Tires spun, mud sprang across the lot, and I peeled out of the motel parking lot as fast as I dared in the storm. My hands trembled uncontrollably on the wheel. Weeks later, I learned from local news that the Willow Creek Motel had been abandoned for months. No tenants, no staff, just the skeletal structure of a building that once hosted travelers. Whoever had called me that night had known exactly where I'd be, the route I'd take, and how I would react. It wasn't random. It was calculated. The more I thought about it, the more terrifying it became. Every small detail, the empty lobby, the wide smile, the insistence on taking the pizzas to the third floor, had been a trap. A psychological setup designed to make me move exactly where he wanted. I realized how lucky I had been. One misstep, one hesitation, and I had no idea what could have happened. Even when I told friends about it, most laughed it off, assuming a teenager overreacting. But I knew what I felt. The complete and deliberate manipulation of a stranger, using patience, fear, and isolation to control me. Years later, I still carry that night with me. I avoid empty buildings, dim stairwells, and abandoned motels. Every strange call for delivery, every locked door or flickering light sets off that old fight-or-flight response. Sometimes I drive past the Willow Creek Motel, now fenced off, windows dark and broken. My chest tightens, my hands grip the wheel. I imagine that wide, unnatural smile behind the third-floor windows, watching, patient, waiting. It's a memory that doesn't fade. That night taught me something fundamental. The world is quieter than you expect, but quiet does not equal safe. Danger can be deliberate, silent, and patient, and curiosity alone can put you in its path. Awareness, vigilance, and trusting your instincts aren't just helpful. They can save your life. The world is full of subtle threats that rely on patience and observation. Danger rarely announces itself with noise. It often hides in plain sight, waiting for a single moment of inattention. Trust your instincts, respect boundaries, and never assume that routine or familiarity guarantees safety. Survival isn't just avoiding harm, it's recognizing and respecting the power of caution. It was September 2015, early fall in Flint, Michigan, when the air had that crisp tang of leaves beginning to rot, and college life felt suffocating. I was 20 then, a sophomore just trying to scrape by with classes, part-time work, and whatever meager social life we could piece together. My roommates, Liam, Harper, and Ethan, had been talking for weeks about finding some sort of adventure, something off the usual paths of bars and cheap parties. It wasn't that we were reckless. We just craved something real, a story to carry with us long after the campus dorms and fluorescent-lit classrooms became memories. Liam had stumbled across something online. Brennan Pines Motel, a shuttered relic of the late 90s, abandoned after a fire destroyed half the building in 2000. The forums he scoured promised the thrill of exploring a place untouched for 15 years. Ghost stories mingled with real estate reports. Some claimed it was haunted, others said it had been condemned years ago. It was 30 minutes from the city, past the industrial wastelands and empty fields where trucks once idled and factories spat smoke. By the time we drove up, night had settled into darkness, a heavy blanket broken only by the faint buzzing of the motel's old neon sign. The paint had peeled, letters flickered in fragments of red and blue, and the wind carried a faint, moldy scent. The parking lot was cracked and uneven, weeds pushing through concrete like fingers. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, rusted and warped in places, allowing us access through a gap at the back. Seriously, are we doing this? Harper asked, tugging her jacket closer. Her flashlight trembled slightly in her hand, betraying excitement and apprehension. It's just abandoned, I said, though my voice sounded hollow even to me. It's not like anyone's living here. Liam grinned. Exactly. A little exploration, some pictures, no one gets hurt. Come on. We slipped through the fence and entered the lobby. Dust hung in the air like suspended smoke, motes dancing in our flashlight beams. The smell of mildew and rot was almost sweet, oddly nostalgic, like walking into a place frozen in time. Broken chairs, stacked haphazardly in the corner, papers strewn across desks, guest ledgers from the late 90s faded and curling. It was thrilling and eerie at once, the kind of quiet that presses down on your chest until you realize just how alone you are. We climbed the stairwell cautiously. The second-floor catwalks creaked under our weight, boards missing in spots, leaving gaping holes 40 feet above the lobby floor. Harper dared everyone to cross a narrow section near the railing. Adrenaline surged as Liam stepped carefully, nearly slipping. The flashlight tumbled across the floor below, but I managed to catch it just in time, my heart hammering. Upstairs, the offices looked like a time capsule. Rusted filing cabinets, scattered paperwork with names of guests long gone, vintage computers coated in dust. Ethan leaned too far over a railing, the flashlight beam slicing the darkness, and caught a shadow flicking across a distant hall. "Did you see that?" he whispered, voice barely audible. Before anyone could answer, a loud creak above us. Liam's foot had caught on a tilted board. He tumbled sideways, arms flailing. My heart jumped into my throat as I lunged, grabbing his hands, Harper following behind. He dangled over the edge for a terrifying moment before we pulled him to safety. And then we saw him, a man in an old security uniform, moving silently above us on the second floor, watching. He didn't speak, didn't signal, just observed. "Move slowly," I whispered. And we did, inching Liam across the remaining catwalks, every step a negotiation with gravity and fear. The man followed silently, disappearing after a single, almost approving nod once we reached solid ground. Outside, breathing hard, we stared back at Brennan Pines. It felt alive, watching. And I realized then that sometimes curiosity is a dangerous companion. By mid-October, my memory of Brennan Pines refused to fade. We had returned once, briefly, this time more cautiously, with gloves and proper flashlights. Harper insisted she wanted to photograph the lobby. Ethan wanted to check the old kitchen area, and Liam, still nursing the bruises from the catwalk, just wanted to prove he wasn't scared. I tagged along, torn between fascination and anxiety. The main hallway smelled worse than I remembered, a mixture of damp carpet and rust. Graffiti covered the walls, old cigarette burns pockmarking the carpet. In some rooms, furniture had been scavenged, leaving only peeling wallpaper and shattered glass. Other rooms were untouched, like the owners had just stepped out. It was easy to imagine someone sleeping in those beds yesterday, not 15 years ago. We explored carefully, whispering to each other so as not to startle anything, or anyone. But it wasn't until we reached the back stairwell that I realized something was off. The boards beneath my feet sounded different, more hollow than I remembered. Liam stepped ahead, shining his flashlight down a hallway. A shadow moved, faster than any of us could explain. Not like a trick of the light, something purposeful. Ethan froze. "Did you see that?" he breathed. Harper grabbed my arm. "Don't look too long, just keep moving." We moved forward. The shadow vanished when I blinked, but the unease stayed. It was as if the motel itself was breathing, watching, waiting for us to make a mistake. We found ourselves on the second-floor catwalk again, Liam swearing under his breath about last time. We proceeded cautiously, each step creaking beneath our weight. That's when I saw him, the man in the old security uniform standing across the hallway. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just watched. "Do we leave?" I whispered. Harper shook her head, frozen. Liam froze mid-step. The man's gaze felt heavy, almost like he could see right through us. My pulse thundered in my ears. One wrong step, and I could feel the boards giving way beneath me. We moved slowly, deliberate. Each beam we crossed felt like walking a tightrope over some unseen abyss. The man followed us silently, never making a sound, until we reached the stairwell and solid concrete again. Then, as silently as he appeared, he vanished into the shadows. We didn't speak until we were outside, shivering in the chill night air. Brennan Pines seemed alive. Every broken window and dusty corridor a pair of eyes observing us. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about Brennan Pines. The abandoned structure had left a mark on all of us. Each time we spoke about it, we recalled the same details: the shadow, the man in the uniform, the smell of mildew, the feel of the boards under our feet. I realized the motel wasn't just a building. It was memory itself, a place built from experiences, mistakes, and secrets. We had trespassed, yes, but more than that. We had intruded into its story, and somehow, it was aware. We never went back after that night. The thrill had been replaced by a gnawing awareness. Curiosity comes at a cost. Sometimes the things we chase aren't meant to be found, and the risk is more than just physical harm. Brennan Pines was a reminder that some doors once opened never truly close. Even now, years later, when I drive past empty motels or hear wind through broken windows, I feel it. A presence watching, patient and silent. And I remember that night in Flint, when curiosity almost cost us more than we realized. Curiosity can lead to discovery, but it also carries responsibility and risk. Some places and secrets are better left undisturbed, and understanding your limits can prevent unnecessary danger. I still remember that humid, overcast March afternoon in Kerala like it was yesterday. I was Oliver Hughes, 15, a lanky British kid on my first long cultural exchange trip abroad, and I had just stepped off the bus with our small group of travelers. We were miles from the nearest town, deep in a stretch of jungle that seemed to swallow everything around it. Our guide, Mr. Varma, suggested we stop at a motel he called the Jungle Edge Motel. I had pictured a charming, rustic stopover, but the reality was unsettling. The building was half hidden behind dense foliage, the paint peeling, windows cracked, and the sign swaying weakly in the warm breeze, squeaking with every gust. It looked almost abandoned. There were no other travelers in sight. The staff, when they appeared, were silent and expressionless. I noticed the way they observed us, moving like shadows rather than people. Our host, a tall, thin man with hawk-like features and piercing dark eyes, assigned each family a room without a word of explanation. When I entered my room, I felt a strange chill, even in the heat. The space was sparse: a small bed, a bedside table, and a metal horse figurine sitting neatly on the dresser's edge. Its polished surface gleamed unnaturally in the dim light. Something about it made me uneasy, as though it were watching me. Furniture was missing, wires ran across the walls, and the bathroom reeked faintly of mildew. Later, I tried to distract myself by unpacking and writing a quick journal entry about our trip, but sleep was impossible. Every shadow seemed alive, and every gust of wind rattling the shutters made my heart race. I kept glancing at the metal horse, half expecting it to move. Around 1:15 a.m., I awoke to the sound of the door clicking softly. My heart jumped. I sat up, freezing. My luggage was slightly shifted, nothing stolen but definitely touched. My eyes snapped to the dresser. The metal horse had been turned, now facing the door, staring at me like a silent sentinel. I swallowed hard and whispered for the neighbors, but no one stirred. The guide had slept through it all. My imagination told me I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew something had entered my room. The next morning, the tension had not lifted. Over breakfast in the motel's common area, we noticed something odd. The furniture in the lounge had been burned. Blackened splinters and ash lay near the back porch. The smell of smoke lingered. Our driver, Raju, refused to stay in the building. "Funny business," he muttered, shaking his head. His tone wasn't joking. I felt a chill crawl over my spine. I opened my travel folder and realized one of my passport photos was missing. I checked again, heart pounding, but it was gone. At first I thought it had fallen out during unpacking, but my gut told me otherwise. Someone had been watching us, deliberately, and had entered my room without permission. The thought was almost unbearable. Later I tried to talk to the staff, but the desk was deserted. Rooms were locked, lights dimmed. The place felt abandoned, yet I had seen movement the night before. My neighbors were uneasy too, though few would admit the fear creeping under their skin. Mr. Varma looked troubled too, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone, or something, to emerge from the shadows. We began to compare notes, each of us recounting small, unnerving incidents from the night, a whisper in the hall, a door that creaked open when no one was around, glimpses of movement in peripheral vision. No one laughed it off. It was real, and it was deliberate. By late afternoon, the atmosphere had turned almost unbearable. I stayed in my room, pretending to do homework, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying last night's intrusion. Every sound outside my window, leaves rustling, branches snapping, sent my pulse soaring. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I went to the back porch to get some air, and that's when I saw it. The metal horse, the same one from my room, now sitting at the edge of the porch, facing outward as if warning us. My stomach twisted. The placement was deliberate. Someone was marking territory, leaving a message. "We see you, we control this place." I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was part of a ritual or someone playing a joke, but my instincts screamed danger. I kept my phone close, but the signal was weak and Raju refused to make a call. Every hallway looked longer, darker, and every shadow seemed to twitch in anticipation. I couldn't sleep that night, not a wink. My imagination twisted every sound into threats, the rustle of a curtain, the creak of the bed, the sigh of wind through the broken windows. I felt small, powerless, and entirely exposed. The next day, we decided to confront the motel staff. But when we reached the desk, the place was padlocked, empty. The metal horse sat at the entrance, facing outward, silent and commanding. My throat tightened. Someone had been there, and they had left it as a warning. Fear pushed us into action. The guide, neighbors, and I didn't wait for explanations. We fled down the jungle path, hearts hammering, sweat rolling down our backs despite the humidity. Behind us, the Jungle Edge Motel loomed in silence, enigmatic and menacing. I dared not look back. For hours I ran through my mind everything that had happened. The silent watchers, the shifting luggage, the burned furniture, the stolen passport photo. The realization sank in. Curiosity had almost led us into danger. We had glimpsed something deliberate, patient and predatory, a silent game that we were not meant to play. Back home in England, I tried to leave the Jungle Edge Motel behind. Yet for years, the memory haunted me. Every time I closed a door, every time I heard a creak in the night, I imagined eyes watching from just beyond. I couldn't shake the feeling that the motel's shadows had followed me across continents. I thought about the control the watchers had wielded, the subtle manipulations that made a simple stopover so terrifying. The experience taught me vigilance, caution, and respect for the unknown. The world is often quieter than you expect, but that doesn't mean it is safe. I never returned to India's jungles. The motel remained a phantom memory, a place where curiosity almost became danger. The metal horse, the silent sentinel, became a symbol in my mind, a warning that not all threats announce themselves with noise or movement. Curiosity is powerful, but it must be tempered with awareness and caution. The world contains quiet dangers that observe patiently, and even small lapses in vigilance can bring one to the edge of harm. Respect boundaries, trust instincts, and remember that sometimes silence carries its own menace. Awareness and prudence are tools that protect far more than fear alone ever could. It was February 2019, and Colorado had settled into its unforgiving winter rhythm. The kind of cold that turns breath into smoke and makes the silence outside feel like it has weight. My name is Evan Mercer, 22 at the time, and I had been working the graveyard shift at the Starlight Motor Lodge, Gikoint, for 6 months. I wasn't supposed to stick around this long. The motel job had been a stopgap after I dropped out of college, just enough to keep my bank account from bleeding while I figured out my life. But there was a certain comfort in the monotony, the hum of the vending machine, the flickering lobby TV, the smell of coffee brewing in the middle of the night. The Starlight sat alone on a stretch of highway, pressed between 2 empty fields, one littered with rusting trucks, the other a wasteland of dead grass, whipped constantly by the icy wind. Most nights were quiet, a lonely trucker, a couple looking for privacy, or the occasional traveler too tired to care about the motel's peeling paint and flickering neon lights. Lately, though, things had felt different. Rooms 5 through 9 had been under renovation after a plumbing collapse, leaving me alone with the highway, the cold, and that constant hum of fluorescent lights. The night started routine. I microwaved leftovers from dinner, checked the guest registry, and texted my sister promising to quit soon. At 1:47 a.m., the security monitor caught movement in the parking lot, a shadow flitting behind one of the support beams. Leaning closer, I saw nothing. But then the motion sensor light by room 2 on, flickered on. My stomach tightened. The registry said the room was empty. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside. The cold cut through my jacket. Snow crunched under my boots. Across the lot, nothing stirred. No one. Just a half-buried soda can rolling in the wind. I returned to the front desk, and the monitor showed a figure standing at the edge of the lot. Tall, coat zipped high, face obscured. I spun toward the window. Empty. When I looked back at the monitor, gone. I called Mr. Klein, the property manager, a former cop, cranky as hell, who lived 15 minutes away. Probably a drifter, he said, yawning. Lock up and don't do anything stupid. I'll swing by in the morning. I hung up. Tried to rationalize. Tried to focus on a book. Then, a faint metal tapping on the glass. I looked up. A handprint, wet and fresh, slowly sliding down the front door. No footsteps, no figure. Just that handprint. I locked the door. My hand hovered over the silent emergency button, every nerve screaming. The lights flickered. The landline was dead. Cell service gone. My chest tightened. Then headlights cut across the lot, an old pickup idling by the lobby window. Relief until I noticed. The engine was running, but no one was inside. The passenger door creaked open, snow blowing in. I swallowed hard. Hello? My voice shook. Only the squeak of the lobby's swinging sign answered me. Vacancy. Then a bang from down the hall. Room 3. I froze. Footsteps? No. I grabbed my flashlight and forced myself down the corridor. The carpet was damp, leaving footprints I hadn't made. The door to room 3 was ajar. Light flickered weakly. I stepped in. Empty. Just an overturned chair and the faint smell of cigarette smoke. The door slammed behind me. My voice echoed back at me, distorted, whispering my own words. I spun around. Nothing. The emergency lights blared red, then went out. I bolted back toward the lobby. The front door was wide open. Wind-shredded papers. Across the lot, the man in the coat appeared again, closer now. I dove behind the counter. My hand shook over the emergency button. Boots outside, circling slowly, deliberately. Then, silence. Power out. Darkness swallowed everything. Only the weak flashlight beam remained. The handprint, gone. In its place, wet footprints leading to the back office. My heart slammed. The door was open. I ran, slipped on ice. By the time I reached the road, headlights appeared, Klein's truck. I waved frantically. Someone's in there. He stepped out, flashlight in hand. We checked every room. Nothing. No footprints. No pickup. The security system had stopped recording at 1:46 a.m., just before the first sighting. Klein shrugged. Happens more than you'd think. Wind, lights, your mind playing tricks. But it wasn't tricks. I could feel it in my gut. Some part of the motel, or whatever lingered there, knew I had seen it. The man in the coat wasn't human. Not entirely. I didn't stay to find out. I quit the next morning. Never went back for my final paycheck. Sleep became impossible. Every creak, every whisper, every wind gust outside my apartment in Denver reminded me of that night. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Every motel I stayed in afterward felt alive, watching. I couldn't shake the feeling that noticing, paying attention, had invited something. 2 weeks later, I heard the news. The Starlight Motor Lodge burned down. Electrical fire, they said. But when firefighters cleared debris, the melted lobby phone was off the hook. Above the counter, faint but visible, a single blackened handprint. Same size, same shape as the one I'd seen. I didn't want to see it, didn't want to think about it. But some things, once touched by your attention, don't leave. Months passed. I moved into a smaller apartment, avoided highways late at night, tried therapy. Nothing erased it. I realized the motel was a lesson. Notice your surroundings, respect instincts, and trust fear when it arrives. Life is fragile. Shadows, anomalies, strange occurrences. They aren't always tricks, even if the world tells you they are. I carry the memory with me, a constant reminder that awareness comes with responsibility. Some doors once opened, even in thought or attention, can stay open. I sometimes still see shadows in empty motel parking lots. Sometimes the wind carries a faint tapping on a glass door. And I know, noticing is part of life, but some things never let you unsee them. Awareness and attention are gifts, but they carry responsibility. Life's fragile moments, the warnings instinct provides, and the unseen consequences of our actions demand respect. Ignoring danger doesn't erase it, and sometimes noticing is the first step toward survival. I'd always imagined Oregon as peaceful, a place of rain-washed pine trees, coffee shops with fogged windows, and quiet people who minded their own business. When my husband Mark and I moved to Ashford in August 2020, that dream still felt possible. We needed a restart. After the chaos of city life in Phoenix, my layoff, his back injury, the bills stacking up, it seemed like a small town might finally let us breathe. Our apartment sat above a stretch of shops downtown, small but cozy. Still, we needed extra income, and that's how I ended up at the Silver Ridge Motel, working the night shift. It was a long, narrow building at the edge of town, the kind of place truckers and lost travelers used when everything else was full. The first time I saw it, rain streaked the faded blue siding, and the neon sign blinked like it was fighting to stay alive. Silver Ridge, Vacancy. Gregory, the day clerk training me, was a thick-set man with a heavy accent, Russian or maybe Polish, and a smile that seemed glued in place. His eyes, though, always looked too long. When he said my name, Fiona, it came out soft and deliberate, like he was tasting it. Something about him made me uneasy, but I pushed it aside. People were strange in small towns. That's what I told myself. The first few nights were uneventful. I made coffee, checked in the occasional traveler, and scrolled through my phone when things got slow. The motel smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and old wood polish, and the hum of the soda machine was the only real company I had after midnight. Mark usually stayed upstairs in our apartment reading or half asleep on the couch. Sometimes he'd call to check on me. But on my fourth night, around 1:15 a.m., the motel phone rang. "Silver Ridge Motel, front desk," I said. Silence. Then a burst of static, like wind across the receiver. A few seconds later, I thought I heard a whisper, maybe a voice. It was too garbled to tell. "Hello? You've reached Silver Ridge," I repeated, forcing a polite tone. Nothing. Then the line went dead. I stared at the receiver, shrugged, and hung up. Misdial, I figured. A wrong number. But when the phone rang again 5 minutes later, and I heard my name whispered, "Fiona," I froze. The voice sounded like a man's, strangled, distant, desperate. My stomach turned cold. "Who is this?" I asked. Static. Then a faint scream. Then nothing. That night was the first time I realized the woods around Silver Ridge didn't just make noise. They listened back. The next morning I told Mark about the phone calls over coffee. He frowned, rubbing his temples. "Could have been Gregory messing with you," he said. "Guy gives me the creeps." "He doesn't work nights anymore," I said. "Manager said he was let go last year, but I saw him last week. He was in the parking lot talking to one of the long-term guests." Mark set his mug down. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He sighed. "Maybe report it." I didn't. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but the next few nights only got worse. The calls came again, always between 1 and 2 in the morning. Sometimes it was static, sometimes a man shouting my name. Once, I swear, I heard a woman crying. I tried tracing the calls on the motel's system, but every time I lifted the line to check, it was dead. The lights in the lobby flickered that Friday. The TV behind the desk buzzed and distorted, the image bending into lines before cutting out entirely. I unplugged it. When I crouched behind the counter, I noticed something that stopped me. Footprints in the dust under the desk. Not mine. Too large. Too fresh. I stepped back, my pulse hammering. The back door rattled, faintly at first, then harder. The motel dog, a wiry old shepherd the owner let roam the property, started barking from outside. A low, guttural growl echoed through the hall. When I went to the back door, flashlight trembling in my hand, I saw it. Through the little doggy flap, her hand reached in, fingers curling, testing the latch. I screamed and slammed my weight against the door, locking it. The hand disappeared. Mark came running down from the apartment with a baseball bat. "What happened?" "Someone's outside," I said, shaking. "They tried to get in." We called 911, but the signal kept cutting. Typical Ashford cell service. We barricaded ourselves in the office until dawn. Every creak, every gust of wind felt like footsteps. When the police finally arrived, the yard was empty, just wet grass and a single muddy footprint near the door. They took a report, shrugged, and told us to keep the doors locked. That morning, I noticed the motel phone line light still blinking, even though the handset was on the cradle. The motel's owner, Mrs. Delaney, was a widow in her 60s who lived an hour away. When I told her what happened, she looked uneasy, but tried to brush it off. "Probably some drifter," she said. "We get all kinds passing through." I asked about Gregory, why he'd been fired. Her lips tightened. "He violated employee privacy. I'd rather not go into detail." That told me everything I needed to know. I checked the motel's security cameras later that day. The feeds ran on an old digital recorder in the office, cycling through grainy black and white footage of the hallways, lobby, and parking lot. But between 1 and 3 a.m., the hours of the calls, the footage jumped. Blank screens, then static, then back to normal. Every night the same missing window. "Could be a system glitch," Mark said when I showed him. But his voice didn't sound convinced. That night, we decided he'd stay downstairs with me. We brought snacks, coffee, and the bat. The first few hours were quiet. Around 1:10, the phone rang. Mark picked it up before I could stop him. "Hello?" His eyes widened. "Who is this?" He listened for several seconds, his jaw tightening, then slammed the phone down. "It was you," he said to me, his voice shaking. "It sounded like you screaming." I stared at him. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." The lights flickered again. The soda machine clicked, then stopped humming. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Then, 3 slow knocks on the front window. Mark swung around, bat ready. Nothing but rain outside. But when I stepped closer, I saw it. A shape moving behind the reflection, just beyond the line of the parking lot lights. Tall, still, watching. The next morning, I begged Mrs. Delaney to let me quit. She convinced me to finish the week, said she'd have the cameras fixed and the locks changed. I agreed stupidly because we needed the money. That night I came armed with pepper spray and a jittery heartbeat. Around midnight I checked the footage again. The hallway cameras were fine, but when I switched to the exterior view, my stomach dropped. At 12:46 a.m., a man appeared on screen. He was standing by the back door, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat. The timestamp flickered, and for a few seconds, he just stood there, head tilted toward the lens like he knew exactly where it was. Then the feed cut to static. I froze. When it came back, he was gone. I went to the door itself, phone flashlight shaking. The handle was slick with rain and faintly smeared with dirt, like someone had been gripping it. I backed away, locked every door in the lobby, and called Mark to come down. He came running, hair tousled, eyes wide. "He's here again?" I nodded. We stayed huddled behind the counter, lights off, listening. The only sound was rain. Then, faintly, footsteps on gravel. Slow. Deliberate. Mark whispered, "We need to get out." We made it upstairs without turning on the lights. From the window of our apartment, we watched the parking lot below. At first, nothing. Then, from behind the flickering motel sign, a figure stepped forward. The same coat, the same stillness. He looked up toward our window and lifted his hand, slowly, like a wave. I called the police again. This time they arrived in minutes, sweeping the property. They found nothing. But one officer, flipping through the security feed, frowned. "You said this was from tonight?" I nodded. He pointed to the figure on screen. "That guy? That's Gregory Melnick. He died last year, car accident off Highway 22. You sure you saw him?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen, the timestamp blinking 12:46:02, right before it cut to static. We moved out 2 weeks later. Mrs. Delaney never reopened the motel. She told me the system logs showed someone entering room 6 the night before we left, but no key was signed out. The room was empty, except for a blanket folded back and the smell of cigarette smoke. Mark and I settled in a new apartment closer to town. For a while, things were calm. But sometimes, late at night, the landline would ring, just once, and stop. The dog we adopted would growl at the door for no reason. I'd lie awake, listening for footsteps that never came. I never saw Silver Ridge again, though I still dream about it. In my dreams, the lobby lights flicker, the phone rings, and through the glass I see a man watching me, his reflection split by the neon glow. He doesn't move. He doesn't need to. People ask why I'm jumpy around dark windows or why I always keep my phone's flashlight on. I tell them I worked nights once. That's usually enough. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I swear I still hear the phone's faint static and a voice whispering my name. Evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. It can look like a man you once trusted, a place you thought was safe, or a memory that refuses to fade. Listen to your instincts. When something feels wrong, don't wait for proof, because by the time you get it, the danger may already be inside.